But let's start by asking, should we even be talking about happiness and money? Is happiness important? Maybe happiness is just a frivolous flight of fancy. It's a bit dopey, a bit Pollyanna, just a sort of a goofy smile on your face, but nothing more than that. So one of the things we do to justify happiness is we went around the world and we asked people from several dozen countries, on a 1 to 10 scale, could you please rate how desirable, how valuable, how important these worthwhile outcomes are? Being happy, being wealthy, falling in love, being good looking, getting into heaven. I mean, if you believe in heaven, you should probably rank that one the highest, I think. But we asked people from all over the world, so different cultures, and you're going to find different patterns. Here's what we found. If you average across all the cultures, basically, happiness and love take the cake. People think those are the most important. People worldwide thought being happy was more important than getting into heaven. They thought being happy was more important than being good looking or being wealthy. Now, you can see, of course, that a more religious country like Brazil, with a high degree of religiosity, rated heaven pretty good, and a non-religious country like China rated getting into heaven pretty low. But even in the US, when we're a pretty religious country, you can see that happiness really took the cake. People think that it is a worthwhile goal. It may not be the only worthwhile goal. All of those things are desirable. But people spend a fair amount of time making choices, everyday choices, retirement, vacation, where should I go to college, based on assumptions about what will pay off for them in terms of happiness dividends. Another way we know happiness is important is by looking at its effect on health and longevity. This isn't just people's opinions about happiness, but now we're actually looking at real, tangible, real-world outcomes. So one of the ways that researchers did this, researchers in Kentucky actually, they did a study that is now classic, now famous, called the Nun Study. Here's what they did. A bunch of nuns, decades ago, were about to enter the convent. And on the day they entered the convent, they wrote personal autobiographies, one-page autobiographies. And then also they signed a consent so that when they died, they would give their brains over to science for Alzheimer's research. And then the nuns went about the business of being nuns for the rest of their lives. Well, these researchers in Kentucky said, wait, you know, it's really interesting that we have these one-page biographies written by these nuns decades ago. Why don't we do this with them? Why don't we look at how positive or how negative these autobiographies are? So they had coders go in and rate these autobiographies as being particularly upbeat and kind of joyful and light, or a bit somber. I'll just give you an example. One of the more somber types of autobiographies might say something like, "It is my solemn duty to constantly obey the rule of the church." You can see that's not exactly a barrel of laughs, right? Even though it might be a worthwhile thing to do. One of the more upbeat types of narratives would read something like, "Oh, it is with the greatest joy that I spread the love of Jesus." You can just hear that that's a bit bouncier in tone. And so what they did is they wanted to just follow up and see among these least happy nuns and most happy nuns, as indicated by a single one-page autobiography written at age 20, who later in life was still alive. Here's a picture of the happy nuns. So they followed them up very late in life. And here's what they found with the least cheerful nuns. Now, I should probably say from a researcher's point of view, it's very nice that they were able to use nuns, because this is what we would call a quasi-experimental study. That is, their living conditions were pretty controlled. Nuns have the same drug habits, the same drinking habits, the same sexual habits, the same diet, right? I mean, you know, like, all these things that might contaminate longevity is held constant. So really, it is, to some degree, just kind of how upbeat or not these nuns are. So, you know, if we just look at the least cheerful nuns, and I went to Catholic school, and I'm pretty sure that Sister Gertrude was part of this group, you can see that half of them are still alive in their mid-80s, and a full, you know, fifth are still alive at age 93. So if you have learned nothing else today except just this one thing, it's that most everyone should become a nun. It seems to be pretty clean living, right? If you want, you know, really good old age, being a nun seems like a good way to get there. Let's look at the most cheerful nuns. That's a striking difference to me. Look at that. If you really want old age, you should be a happy nun. Absolutely. As many of the happy nuns were alive at age 93 as the unhappy ones were at age 85. And considering, you know, average life expectancy in the United States, which fortunately continues to get older and older, but 93 is certainly pushing the boundary to say half of any particular group of people are still alive at 93. I mean, that's really extraordinary, because you know a lot of these people are going to go on to become centurions. So one of the things we conclude from this is that something about happiness is good for your health, and through other studies we know that it boosts your immune system, and I'm not making grand claims like somehow happiness is going to cure cancer or something like that, but we definitely know from controlled studies that it boosts your immune system such that you're less likely to come down with the common cold. It regulates your fibrinogen, so your blood clotting, basically, so you're less likely to have hypertension, stroke, and so forth if you're a happy person. So there are some real tangible benefits related to happiness. Here are a few of them we find across studies. Happy people have lower turnover at work, better reports of customer service, they get better supervisor evaluations, they have higher job satisfaction, they show up to work more, they're more likely to help their colleagues, they volunteer more in the community, they also donate more money to charity. They're perceived by others as being more friendly, more confident, more assertive, regardless of whether they actually are. They make more money. They just have higher annual salaries. They get promoted more often. They live longer. They're more likely to be judged of getting a pay raise, being worthy of that. They're more likely to be judged as creative. They're more motivated. They persevere more at difficult tasks. They are better, more efficient decision makers. The list actually goes on. They visit the emergency room less, they wear their seatbelts more, they smoke less, they drink alcohol to excess less. And if you're the kind of person who cares at all about pay raises, supervisor evaluation, seatbelts, creativity, then happiness has got a pretty good return on investment. I think that's interesting that we can predict seatbelt use by whether or not a person is happy. So we think that happiness is worth talking about. Now, I'm just going to linger here for